Good morning. As many of you know, my name is Robert Proctor. I'm the Government Affairs Director for RASCOW. And this seminar is about Afford a Future Dane County. Uh, Afford a Future Dane County is RASCOW's effort, or part of RASCOW's effort, to address the affordability problem, especially from the expertise that the realtors bring to the issue. And it's to address safe and affordable housing in Dane County. It's something that I'm really, really excited about, and it's been a focus. What Afford a Future Dane County is as a campaign. What I'm trying to do is focus a number of different things that we have been doing in a more haphazard way into one sort of packaged effort to address affordability. And the idea of it came from the Wisconsin Realtors Association and the National Association of Realtors, where they really challenged us on the local level to take the wins that they have done and the resources that they have in order to apply them to the ground level and to say, okay, we've got these wins at the state level and these wins at the national level and all of these resources. How are you going to translate those to the local level, the local GADs? And so here's, for example, the 2020 advocacy agenda for the NAR says that affordability is their number one priority in 2020. And when dealing with the Wisconsin Realtors Association, our state association, many of you have seen this, and that is they did a report called Falling Behind on Workforce Housing. And in that report on workforce housing, they did a study with Kurt Paulson from the Graskamp School at the University of Wisconsin and found what we all know to be true is that there's a lack of housing in Wisconsin and Dane County, and that it particularly affects African Americans and Hispanic families, that the costs are rising, the need for a workforce to have housing is rising, but the number of housing isn't. And one part that I really want to focus on from the realtor's point of view that has been missed, I believe, by so many of the other affordability groups is single family home ownership. Almost all of the units that you really see being pushed and the argument of affordability seems to have centered on rental properties and multifamily properties. And there doesn't seem to be a push for creating affordable single family properties. So the idea was and many of you know Tom Larson and Joe Murray and Corey Lamont, and they literally said, we want to see you do something in Dane County using these resources and translating what we do at the state to the local level. And so the idea was to really focus on affordability, but with a secondary focus on, making affordability for single family residential a big portion of that, because it's kind of the missing middle, as you'll see in a lot of these reports. So when we look at what is affordability, so I think this has become a really difficult thing to explain to people. So from the Falling Behind report, they explain affordable to mean 60% of the area's median income for owning families earning up to, that your affordable housing is renting families earning up to 60% of the area's median income, and for owning families earning up to 120%. So I think an easier way to look at that are these two graphs, or these two tables. So these tables were done by Kurt Paulson, the same person who did the Falling Behind report. And you'll see when we look at low income limits, so 80% of the average median income in Dane County would be for one person, 52,000, for a family of four, 75,000. And then if you look down at the second table, you'll see how much money they should be spending each month on their housing. So that kind of gives you an idea of the type of housing that we would need. And what it really translates into in the single family world, and we all know it, is we need to create single family housing that averages between $300,000 and $400,000 a year. or sorry, it's $300,000, $400,000 price point for a single family home, which just doesn't exist so much in this area. This will show you exactly the affordable house ownership price levels. So at low income limits, at 80% of AMI, an affordable house is $273,974, which doesn't, I don't believe, exist in Dane County. Certainly not in new construction. And you would have to try to find that in an existing home site. And my understanding is that the inventory for those types of homes go off the market immediately. And so that's what we often call, when you hear people talking about the missing middle, what we're talking about is there seems to be housing for the low income, and there certainly is housing for luxury homes. It's the missing middle. It's the affordable house in the middle that we're no longer able to build. When we go through the Falling Behind report, you'll see what are the causes. And one of the biggest causes is that there's simply not enough new homes being built to keep up with the population and income growth. And in the biggest counties in the state, Dane, Brown, and Waukesha, having that collectively they're underproducing 15,000 housing units in the past decade. So when we look at Dane County and we try to map out where the future of the future population is going, Kurt Polson has put together some projections, who's the guru on this subject. He does this both for Dane County and for the realtors. And he has estimated that we need to add 1,000 units a year just to keep up with the growth in workforce population, which means, and we're not doing that. That means as either apartments or housing, there needs to be 1,000 new units each year just to stay where we are, which is in an affordability crisis. And so, and the best way to do that is going to be to build our way out of it. And housing has fallen behind. We're building less houses today than we did back in 2007 before the housing crisis. The other two causes are construction costs are rising faster than inflation and incomes. Most of you have heard about the fact that lumber has gone through the roof, which is a poor pun, but lumber prices have been incredibly high. But even the one thing I don't like about focusing on the construction costs and lumber prices is the fact that construction costs are really high and outgrowing incomes without lumber. It's not as bad, obviously, but it's not just lumber that's been the problem. This has been a problem before the lumber prices. And this report actually came out before lumber prices went up, the Falling Behind report. And then the third one, and this is the one we fight most on the ground level at Raskow, is outdated land use regulations drive up the costs of housing. And I'm not going to read it word for word, but if you look on this slide, there's a quote that I took from the 2016 White House Housing Development Toolkit. This is the toolkit that the city of Madison is actually using right now to try to fix some of its affordability issues. It was written by President Obama's White House. So this is not some sort of conservative or liberal view. It's the accepted view that local barriers, whether it's zoning or environmental or other sort of regulatory fees, all of them well-meaning, have been the single biggest obstacle to us trying to create more affordable inventory through new building. Before I get too far, most of the ideas on those zoning regulations and land use regulations, they're well-meaning, but they have the unintended consequence of making housing too expensive to build. And so one of the areas we look to is trying to eliminate those that don't solve the problem that they were intended to solve, whether it's minimum lot sizes, whether it's stormwater requirements, whether it's types of construction. is you really have to go through those with a fine-tooth comb and decide, hey, is this ordinance or regulation that's driving up prices 10, 15%, is it really solving a problem? And if it's not, we have to get rid of it. The National Association of Home Builders has estimated that 25% of the cost of every new home goes to regulatory fees and getting through the approval processes. So 25% of the cost of a home is simply the red tape side of it, trying to get that home from the raw land to the building of the house, trying to get it approved by the municipality. And if you've got a $400,000 house, you can only, guess about how much you can obviously how much that costs us. So the Wisconsin Realtors Association put out a roadmap to reform, and they articulated these issues that we need to address at the local level in order to try to get more affordable housing. And I'm only going to point out a couple of them. One is obvious, but it's obvious when we talk about it at 30, 50,000 feet. But when we appear at a city council meeting or a neighborhood association meeting, it's not so obvious. And that is build more housing. Because most neighborhoods, when you say, I'm going to build a neighborhood next to you, and you tell them, but we want to do it with denser lots and more housing, they're not very excited, to say the least, to see that. Another one is to expedite the permitting and development approvals. Jumping down to the bottom, smaller lots for single family homes. This is an incredibly important one. And the reason for that is all developers generally are required to put in their infrastructure. That means the roads, the sewers, the water. And that costs a lot. Let's just say for the last subdivision I looked at, I believe all in it was $3 million. Well, if you're dividing that cost up between 100 lots as opposed to 50 lots, it's easier to spread that cost over all of the lots that you are selling. It's easier to afford it. When you're required to have much bigger lots in the single family neighborhood, it makes it much more costly, and each lot makes every home much more expensive. And then finally, I would look at the last one in the second row is making housing a priority. Every time I testify at a city council meeting or a town board meeting on issues for the Realtors Association, I always want to say to them, whether it's on landmarks, whether it's on stormwater, have you looked at what this will do to affordability in the area? And the answer is always no. And then the answer is usually a debate. But just like at the state of Wisconsin, whenever they pass a law, they're required to have a study done on it to make sure, what is this going to do to the taxes? What's this going to do to revenue as opposed to costs? And I would like to see every time we pass an ordinance in our municipalities that they say to themselves, when we pass this ordinance on zoning, what's the impact on housing and housing affordability? So what I just went through is kind of like what was the challenge given to us at RASCOW from the National Association and the State Association, saying, here's the information we've given you showing affordability is the problem. Here's what we believe the solutions are. How are you going to do that? And we want you to put together programs locally to implement it. And so my point to everybody is expanding housing options is really hard. Changing the local zoning codes and the land use regulations is a long, thankless, and boring process. I don't know if Tim Rail's on the line, but it's usually Tim Rail and I alone at attending a lot of different types of meetings or working on a lot of types of issues, because the last meeting I remember we were on, Tim Rail and I, was an affordability meeting for the city of Madison. I think it went for 4 hours. It at least went for 3 hours, 3 to 4 hours. And you get 3 minutes to speak during it, and then you have to listen to it. So it's a long process. that takes a lot of time commitment. The housing development and financing is very complex. And then the last problem we run into is that existing homeowners and renters, they vote right now for elected officials. So when a new zoning code or a new ordinance or a new development comes in with density, the people who appear at those meetings are people who are already there and are afraid of the change, afraid of the density, afraid of, would prefer to see no more development. And future homeowners and renters do not vote now for elected officials. They obviously don't exist. They don't exist till they purchase their home. Then they usually object to the next phase of the development. And that was just a poor joke. I can't see anybody's faces, so I don't know how it went over. But anyway, the future home renters don't vote. So that was the huge need for us to engage on the issues. And so what we started out doing is the first one we did, which is where I'm saying we did it started to do step by step. We did what we call Fair Housing Fitchburg. Fitchburg has been ground zero for debates between neighborhoods, the elected officials, developers, and housing advocates because of the unique nature of the fact that it borders Madison and it has a lot of rural housing and it has a lot of conflicting desires, from maintaining the rural landscape and farming to providing housing, to having a number of large houses and people who live in the better school districts. It just has a confluence of events there. And in Fitchburg, in 2020, they adopted their comprehensive plan. And I think a lot of people on the call know what a comprehensive plan is, but every 10 years, the municipality has to come up with a plan that will explain to everybody that this is what the planning is going to be like for the next 10 years. For the next 10 years. And it's really important because all zoning decisions that happen after the plan is adopted have to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. So the goals and the strategies and the land use decisions in the comprehensive plan were going to impact what happened in Fitchburg for the next 10 years. During this time, the mayor of Fitchburg, and I'm picking on him here, even though I believe Mayor Richardson's he's a very good guy, and he works hard as a mayor. But one of the reasons he was running for mayor at the end of 2019 was because in 2020 they were going to be doing the comprehensive plan, and as you can see in this email he sent out to his residents, he said, we need to see less density in our new developments and a lot less apartments. And his promise was to ensure these guidelines are included in the comprehensive plan. And so based on where it was going in Fitchburg, we decided that's the perfect place for us to do our first attempt at a campaign on affordability. And so we went to the National Association of Realtors and the WRA and got grants, went to the Raskow board to get approval for it. And we ran what we call Fair Housing Fitchburg, which was a issue mobilization campaign. It was, and I'll read this part of the slide, it was designed as a multi-pronged campaign that would shine a bright light on the process through digital advertising, social media, and attendance at public hearings to ensure that housing affordability was a priority in the comprehensive plan. And so the idea of it was, it's been our belief that the public at large and the politicians haven't been educated enough on the factors of affordability. So we were like, we need to not have this happen in a back room. We need to make sure that everybody knows what's going on. And so we, with a large grant from the National Association and working with a third party, ran digital campaign. So on Facebook, on Twitter, and in ad videos all through Fitchburg, explaining to them for over 6 months that the comprehensive plan rewrite was going on. We actually got the attention of the local television stations, and we were interviewed on one of the local stations. Both stations ran stories on the comprehensive plan in Fitchburg, 2 other television stations. And by the end, our campaign had generated 2,600,000 impressions in Fitchburg. These were all pounded into Fitchburg, where so people knew what was going on. And we believe, and so to give you some of the examples, here are some of the ads that you would see that we ran, type of ads that we ran. And these would be videos that would appear when somebody went on Facebook or somebody went to online to look at something and they were had a Fitchburg area code or Fitchburg information. This is what they would see. Different types of ads that we were running the whole time. And what came out of Fair Housing Fitchburg is a comprehensive plan that we strongly supported at the end, that had housing goals to create a more diversity in housing, more density in areas, that created more apartments and single family to meet the growing needs of Fitchburg. Now, I'm not going to overstate our part of that. A lot of people worked very hard, mostly the board members that felt strong about housing, and with a lot of good information provided by the City of Fitchburg staff. But what we felt we were able to do is that there were a lot of forces out there that would have, we believed, really watered down the affordable goals in the comprehensive plan if we hadn't come along to shine just a bright light on the process, educate people, and make sure people knew that there were people with resources out there paying attention and making sure that housing was a big issue in the comprehensive plan. So some of the other things, so that really got the ball rolling. So some of the things we've been doing to kind of keep working on that is, for example, we've built a coalition of other people that, including the Wisconsin Realtors, the Wisconsin Builders, the Madison Area Builders, some of the local unions. People always say, well, why do the unions and the carpenters and the construction business group care? Well, like I was talking about, the infrastructure in a subdivision will be $2, $3, $4, $5 million. Those tend to be union companies, union contractors that build all of the infrastructure. So of course, through their own self-interest, they want to see more single-family homes and more single-family subdivisions, because that's where they get their work. So coming together, we all started raising money together, and we've created a entity called a Better Dane County. And a Better Dane County has been running issue advocacy campaigns on affordability. This is a video. I wasn't able to put it in so that you could see it, but all through Dane County, through 2020, through the April election, to make sure that we make housing a campaign issue in local elections in Fitchburg and Waunakee and throughout Dane County. And that campaign had over 6 million impressions. Now, what an impression is that's kind of like a commercial. When you open up and read an article on CNN or Fox, ABC, and you see a ad, and you see the ad, that's called an impression. And so we had 6 million impressions go out, which is quite a bit. And all we were trying to do over and over and over again is to make affordability a issue, so that when people ran their campaign, affordability would be an issue. And we would also support pro-housing candidates. And this is where we felt that our Fair Housing Fitchburg and our Dane County affordability campaigns had such an effect. There were a number of candidates that in Fitchburg ran simply on the issue of housing. That was their priority issue. And when we support a candidate on behalf of Rathscow, what happens is the committee, the Government Affairs Committee, will interview the candidates running. So in this case, we interviewed Randy Udell. We asked them questions on their position on housing, and then we vote on whether to support and possibly endorse one candidate or the other. And in this case, we endorsed Randy Udell. He was also endorsed by Mark Pocan, who is a friend of the Realtors and a strong housing advocate. I know that he, outside of housing, some people support him, some people don't, but on housing, and And so we ran ads to support Randy Udell because he supported housing. And in those type of campaigns where we supported different candidates on these housing issues, we had over 4 million impressions during the April elections locally. I I have to believe that is a million times more than any other entity that was out there running ads on very local issues. You know, we weren't running state ads. We were just in running all housing ads, and any ad that supported a candidate or that supported a candidate also made clear that he was supported because of his issue, his or her position on housing. And what was interesting is the first ordinance that was then passed, one of the very first ordinances passed by the Fitchburg City Council was a housing one, which was to create to invite in the Dane County Housing Authority to do a study and to create more affordable housing and take down barriers to affordable housing in Fitchburg. So again, I'm going to give all credit to the candidates that ran it, and a lot of people have been pushing housing, but I feel very strongly that we did our part as the Realtor Association of making housing an issue in those areas. So that's where we got to Afford a Future Dane County. So Afford a Future Dane County was, you know, we need to brand ourselves and this campaign so we're not doing these one-offs where, you know, okay, we did Fair Housing Fitchburg. Okay, a Better Dane County did a one-time advocacy run during the April election period. But we want to sustain this over time and take it to different areas. So we got a grant from the National Association of Realtors and being pushed by the Wisconsin Realtors Association. And when I say being pushed, they told me it was a requirement. So they pushed in a very nice way. But so the Realtors Association gave us money to get us started and to do a specific campaign. That's where we did Afford a Future. So our idea now is like what I showed that we did in Fitchburg is to say, okay, we're going to start looking at municipalities where we can educate the public, do outreach campaigns, issue advocacy campaigns, and try to educate them. And so we start with Afford a Future Dane County. So our first campaign is what's called a outreach campaign, consumer outreach campaign. And there was a specific grant from the National Association of Realtors. And we, in applying for it, we said we're going to focus on McFarland and Cottage Grove, two areas where we believe there should be more growth. And we believe that some of the lack of understanding as to affordability and the need for more housing would resonate. And so they provided us a sizable grant. And so we've started running a campaign. Now this is just an outreach grant, unlike what we call an issue mobilization grant in Fitchburg, where we were looking at the comprehensive plan. This grant is more designed to just reach out and educate people through certain types of advertising and so forth. It's kind of what I consider, you know, you kind of come out there and it's the soft touch as you start building up to, okay, now we're going to go after an issue. And just to let you know, the Cottage Grove has just created a new housing committee to create affordability to see what they can do to create more affordable housing in the village. So that will be our next step. We will then engage on that issue. But right now, so you can see on here, this is in the local newspapers. We're running ads talking about the affordability and that the solutions in our own backyard. You can't read it as well there, but in the ad it talks about outdated land use being the biggest barrier. And I believe personally in McFarland and Cottage Grove that it's outdated land use ordinances and also understanding and attitudes about it that are holding those communities back. So we started with, you know, there's the newspaper, and then this is we've been doing digital ads there also for people. And you'll see that the impressions we've had in September and August have been over 170,000, 175,000 impressions. That's a big number when you think about the total combined population in Fitchburg or excuse me, in Cottage Grove and in McFarland is 20,000, less than 20,000, I think. And so they are getting, certainly the people online there are getting bombarded with our ads. And so the engagements that you see are big numbers too. Those are people who've done something. So they'll either like the ad, or they'll forward the ad to somebody, or they'll respond to it and go to a Florida Futures webpage. So that's what we're working on. And what we're going to look to do is really take it to the next level. Raskow's got a new committee on affordability, or I'm not sure it's a new committee, but certainly a new emphasis within a committee to start doing things at the government affairs level. We're trying to get out there on the messaging piece, and we're going to then try to get out there also on the engagement at the local level for ordinances, and then also on engagement on campaigns, using our Afford a Future as kind of the brand that brings that all together. We're going to be doing polling on what are people's attitudes about affordability, and trying to understand what messaging works the best. We'll be doing engagement, these type of campaigns in other municipalities, whether it's Waunakee or Middleton or wherever we believe it's necessary. And so our idea is, what we need to be able to do is have housing needs be the focus of every election. And we have a lot of resources that from the national and state level to do that, money available for us to focus that issue in those elections. And we're going to continue with our efforts of identifying the candidates, interviewing the candidates, and then supporting those candidates that believe in housing. We're also going to do, have to make sure that the housing needs to be the focus of every new ordinance and every municipal decision. Like there should not be decisions being made on different types of new regulations without understanding what it's going to do to affordability. Then finally, we need to be involved in a continuous conversation with the residents, elected officials, and stakeholders with regard to expanding housing options. To me, this is the most important, is like, we can't let, this issue needs to be, you know, one of those, they say in politics a lot of the time, they call it kitchen table issues, you know, the issues of housing, feeding yourself, and jobs are always, you know, those are the ones that keep people up at night. And this housing, I believe certainly that housing in general, but single family home ownership is absolutely being ignored. I could have done a whole seminar, but in this audience, I know you know it better than I do, that home ownership is so much more important than just having a place to live. You know, there's study after study after study that schools do better with more single family home ownership, that children do better in schools who come in from single family home ownership, that, you know, that it translates the pride, the security, every part of being a homeowner translates into people living a better life and being their best version of them. And so that's the part where Afford a Future Dane County really wants to focus on. We support multifamily, absolutely. We support more units, more housing units for people, and getting there in a way that works. But the passion also, I think, from Raskow needs to be the voice for single family home ownership. So, and that's the end. It's rare that I get to talk for 35 minutes straight without being interrupted. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Rick, I don't know if there are any questions in the queue.
Yeah, there was, one was whether or not this presentation will be available to all of you at the end. There will be an email going out, a follow-up email, along with just a quick little couple question survey. And you'll be provided this slideshow. We're recording this, so this will be made available on our social media accounts, as well as our our, our Facebook page and our YouTube page. I did have one question here from Julie Flint. You were talking about, Robert, Cottage Grove. She asked, do they have a location? Can we get clients on a list to purchase for Cottage Grove? Maybe you can respond to that.
So I'm not sure I understand exactly the question. So getting customers in Cottage Grove, like buyers in Cottage Grove, right now, my understanding is Cottage Grove has very little inventory for new homes. Last time I looked, this was 2019, so I don't know 2020. I think they had less than 20 building home starts, which means they only built 20 homes, which is nothing. Before the recession, I believe 2006 or 7, they did over 120 new homes in a year. So for them to be doing under 20 when the economy, pre-COVID economy had roared back, is an illustration of how little supply there is. They went, the economy was roaring prior to COVID, and their housing market for new homes hadn't come back at all. Now, I know that they have new developments coming online, so there may be houses there, but as far as a list of customers that looking to buy, I don't have a list.
Okay. Thank you for that. Joe Long, you had your hand up. You're unmuted, buddy. Go ahead.
Hey guys, how we doing?
Good.
I'm just thinking here, let's say we were able to impact costs, remove regulation, drive down the cost of building and development. We're still in a seller's market with very low inventory. How do we get a developer to sell a house at a more affordable price when the market is dictating that they can get whatever they want right now? So without some kind of outside intervention, if you just let the market do its thing, are they going to do this out of the good of their heart? Or what actually encourages a developer taking advantage of those lower costs to sell below market and not just take advantage of additional margin?
Yeah, so thank you for the question, and it's a great question, and it gets complicated. So certainly I'm going to kind of focus on single family because multifamily has that intervention, as most people know, in tax credits and so forth. On single family, the long term, so I'm talking 10 years, it's going to have to be the market that brings it out. There's going to have to be supply is going to have to exceed demand so that the pricing comes down. And so we're going to have to build a lot to get to that point. In the short term, just to avoid the market being totally exploited and to a pure emergency, we have to build a lot more just to stay kind of in this crisis mode. But to your point of less expensive, there's kind of two ways I've been seeing it in the real world. Is the developers who have got the municipalities to agree to much smaller lot sizes have also represented to the municipalities that their pricing will come in much lower. So what I mean by that is that if you look at a normal subdivision of nice size lots, you may see 3 units per acre. The lower for single family to be under 400 or to even be at 300,000, you need to see 9 units per acre, let's say 7 to 9 units per acre. And there are a number of developments in Fitchburg there are some developments in Fitchburg that are able to do that and that are going to probably be replicated around Dane County, creating row housing or very small setbacks between the houses. And the model for those are to sell, between 300 and 350,000 for, in essence, a single family home. And they go off and so selling them by the developer, because their model is to move them very fast, hasn't been really the problem. It could be, but what happens is when those houses turn over quickly, so somebody buys it as their starter home for $325,000. Well, the market's so tight, they stay in it for 3 years and then want to move into a different home. They sell it for 400,000, 425. And so to your point, I guess the issue is I think that on the front end that municipalities, when they approve these, they need to be approving them with the idea of what the list price market's going to be for them. But the problem is, and it's a great question that I don't have an answer to, that as that market starts to churn, all of a sudden these houses grow in cost because of the demand. And so I think the only way out of it is just to create a lot of supply of them. So, which is going to take years to solve that problem.
The question from Javier. My question is, what exactly is affordable? Most families make between 50 and 75 a year combined. Will there be new homes being made under 300,000?
Well, this was a graph on affordability and what housing is affordable. So it's a great question. The reality is that affordable is whatever the definition you come up with. Another definition I like is cost burden. And the idea is that your cost burden, if you spend more than 30% of your income on housing and utilities. And so for me, I want to see housing at every level so that people can live in the house that fits their level. But the truth is that that point is exactly right. We need housing under 300,000. And there is not a new housing product for that right now. I believe that when I talk about the developments in Fitchburg, I believe that there are a couple going on in that two come to mind. One is in the Civium development, and one is a Viridian development, where they both have high density single family that are coming in around 300,000, I believe. Maybe a little bit more. I don't know if right now if you could take the same developments and put them in Cottage Grove or McFarland or some of the other areas where land costs are less, you may be able to get it under 300, but that missing house is the 250 to 300. And we all know what's crazy is we think of housing under 300 is impossible to do. You can go, once you get out of Dane County, you can buy great housing in the 200s, wonderful housing in the 200s. You just can't do it in Dane County. So the only product I know of under 300,000 right now in Dane County is Habitat, is the Habitat product. And the Habitat for housing product, I still believe is a 270 house, $270,000 house or so. It's a big number. It's hard to do in Dane County. And so that's why it's so important.
Laura Dvorak, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Thanks. You answered a few of my questions just momentarily, but I was going to, in Nordic Ridge, we have what's called PUD lots, which we can't really, I'm understanding that I'm a realtor. However, we are a developer as well. And it's very difficult to get pricing we're not taking big profit at all. And to get a house under 350, 359 even is very, very difficult for us. What do you see with this election? Our next phase in Nordic Ridge is actually almost all these smaller lots, but we're kind of on the fence about this election and where this is going to put this housing situation. Is it going to get worse, or will we see anything better? And can Stoughton be part of this future affordability? We've got a whole nother subdivision that we've got a lot of mixed use that we're working with the mayor on right now, but we're not sure how things are going. We're saying we need all this housing, but yet we can't get the numbers to work, like the Habitat, housing, or the Viridian housing. I mean, we're not like a one builder subdivision where they mass produce, these same looking houses, and yet we want to provide affordable housing for people.
No, and that's a great point. So on 2 points, Stoughton is high on our list, and they will be seeing a Florida Future Dane County and Stoughton. And it's got the same attitudes to me as Cottage Grove and McFarland, in the sense that they're not used to thinking of themselves as, I don't want to use the word urban because it's loaded, but you're not, they don't think of themselves as having the smaller lots and the row housing and so forth. And they view that as more low income than understanding that it doesn't have to be that. But yes, that would be one area that we look to. On the second issue, you're right. There's one, like the state of Wisconsin and certainly Dane County is different than a lot of the country in the sense that we have custom home builders, much smaller builders. Viridian's our only large scale builder. We have none of, William Ryan Homes also, I should take that back, but we, is a regional builder, but they're smaller here. We don't have the really large national home builders like there are home builders that are actually public companies traded on the stock market. And when you do custom home building, it's a lot harder to come in on the affordability side for the reasons that Laura said, which is you don't get to kind of mass produce and get the economy of scale for the same products. There's a reason you can only buy so many versions of a house from the larger home builders, because they've got their costs figured out on them. So it is a struggle, like you said, to get them to 359, and a lot of that has to do with the cost of the infrastructure. So this is not going to help you right now, but the idea is at the state level to make changes to the law regarding tax incremental financing that can't be used right now in single family housing. It can, but it's complicated as part of a larger commercial project. It can, but we need a way to be able to bring down the cost of the infrastructure so that cost doesn't get attached to the home that, like you're trying to do, Laura, which is so you can bring those costs down. So for example, if we could do a TIF district and have your development included in that TIF district and allow for the TIF to pay for the infrastructure, then that infrastructure wouldn't have to go on the sales price. And so that's some of the workforce housing bills that the WRA is working with at the state. And what's interesting is that the issue on the workforce housing bill for TIF, when we talk about the election is going to be a mixed bag. Many of the pro-business views of the Republicans, if they lose at different levels, could hurt the economy. But there's also, on the flip side, at the state level, the barrier to creating more workforce housing through passing legislation that the realtors and builders have been trying to pass on the workforce housing has been the Republicans in the state Senate. And so this election may free that up. There are a number of Republicans in the state Senate that feel that creating these type of incentives for housing development shouldn't be done, that it's corporate welfare, and so they have prevented it from getting a vote where we believe it would pass. And if that had passed, and if we can get it to pass in the next session, you could then potentially create a TIF district to lower the cost of your infrastructure and bring the cost of those houses down. So the next election, so I think it's really difficult to determine what the next elections will do to housing. And if you ask me what I'm afraid of, I'm more afraid of what the COVID-induced recession, or I don't want to call it recession, COVID-induced economic issues, and how they linger and how they're addressed will do to it. You know, how big is the pain going to be?
Sure. Okay. We do have a TIF district, but I don't really know what's happening with it. I haven't seen much of anything, but it's not in our subdivision.
Yeah, and
So,
any TIF district, I forgot the exact percentages, but you can have residential in a TIF district, but a certain percentage, which is most of it, has to be commercial. So it's not
mhm.
an easy tool for making affordable housing. TIF isn't. That's why we need a change to it. And the realtors have a drafted bill that has been through committee that, you know, it's ready to be approved as soon as it, and the governor, I believe would, well, I don't believe the governor's taken a position, but would, I would be shocked if the governor wouldn't sign it. It just needs to get through the Senate, the state Senate, is my understanding.
Okay, thank you.
We have Ruby and Chris Conrad and Conrad Development on here. We just have a question that kind of revolves around what we're talking about here. Are there any grants currently available to help with, say, the infrastructure land costs? I mean, right now, it says they're you know, been working for several years to create affordable housing in Fitchburg. You know, trying to offer homes between 200 and 250, which is their goal, but it's extremely challenging because of those costs. It says, P.S. We are in conversations with WIDA. So I don't know if there's any expansion you can do, Robert, on what you've already talked about.
No, there are things, if, I don't know of any. I assume that there are ways to do it. I would suspect if there was a lot of resources for it, they would be being used. For example, on the apartment side, multifamily side, there are a large number of developers that's all they do. Gary Gorman is an easy example. They moving out is another example.
Yeah.
They just, there are all sorts of tax credits for affordable apartments that it's created an entire industry of affordable housing builders, developers in the multifamily side to create that product. I don't know of any that exist in the on the residential side, single family side, and I suspect there's not any because I believe somebody would have figured it out and you would be seeing it over and over again. The closest is Habitat for Humanity. And in my conversations with Habitat for Humanity, they run into all the same problems we do as developers, objections from neighboring communities, you know, not as much support from the municipalities as you would believe they would get, construction costs, and I believe, I don't want to speak for them because I don't know their model as well as maybe I should, but I believe that they get a lot of grants and stuff and donations as a nonprofit to be able to make that work. So, but that's exactly the problem. What the question touches on exactly the problem, same as Laura's question, that at the state level, what the realtors are trying to do is solve that through affordability bills that will focus on single family as opposed to multifamily.
Okay. And this isn't a question as much as it is a comment, some commentary from Nancy Barth. I live in a small town outside of Madison. Listening to village board meetings for several decades, the municipalities need to have the infrastructure in place. Due to the cost of expanding or additional water and sewers often cost prohibiting, they don't necessarily want new developments. Not seeing the bigger picture of more homes, more tax income, et cetera. They only see a strain. So more discussion needs to be at the municipality level to encourage the builders to come to the table and be able to do it where it is profitable for the builder as well, which again, I think is, you know, very instrumental in what we're trying to do with these campaigns, is to educate and put this stuff forward. Any commentary there, Robert?
No, I think that puts a nice bow on the presentation. That's 100% right. And I think what it is that for some communities, they don't want change and we have to respect it. For other ones, they fear the change. And in that case, where I think the fear is unfounded, we need to have that discussion and we need to be able to show them examples and be at the table with them, so that, you know, we have to be a good partner with them. So thank you. Oh, the last thing I want to add is, if you want to be more involved in these things, there's a number of ways to do it. And you should reach out to either Rick, Corey, or me, and what kind of involvement you would like. And we can put you in the right direction, whether it's being more involved in the government affairs side, or a number of the other committees that work on this. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're just about out of time here. I've got Chaim had his hand raised. I'm going to go ahead, Chaim, if you're ready.
Sure. I have a short story in closing, and that's taught to me by Tim Rail. Once upon a time in a place called Sun Prairie, they had a development where the developer was told they needed an 8-acre park. And then after that, they went to parks, and park department said, no, we want a 1-acre park with a big swing set. 8 months later, after the two government bodies discussed it interminably for 8 months, it went to a 1-acre park with a big infrastructure for the kids. It raised the prices $5,000 because of the holding costs, which was a total unnecessary waste of money for everybody. And all the houses were $5,000 more, just because they tied up all the process for so long and there was increased cost. Please use the story.
Thank you, Chaim. And it's a story that gets repeated over and over again, and it is really the balance of providing the amenities that the municipalities want to provide, but also asking yourself, you know, how does this affect affordability?
And just the time of how long it takes just adds costs. So if they do it more quickly, that saves money. And it's unnecessary money increasing the costs of our housing.
Yeah, I agree.
I've got time for one more question. Amy Lewison, you're out there with your hand raised. I'm trying to unmute you.
Morning.
Good morning.
So I just wanted to throw this out there to you realtors who have buyers who are probably looking under that price point. I recently found out that me and my builder partner are being awarded some lots on Madison's east side. Some of you may be familiar with the development Owls Creek, and some of you might know some of the backstory with that. The city ended up taking over those lots about 6 years ago, right after my builder partner and I had put up 2 new homes on one of those streets over there. So we've been trying to get some more of those lots for the last 6 years, and just found out we're going to get some more. We don't know a time frame. Probably looking at in the spring, and target price ranges are probably going to be around $320 to $340. So I'm putting out feelers to see if some of you want to get on like an email update list for me, because I don't know anything right now about timeframes. It's a city, so you know everything goes through committee. But I just wanted to put that out there. I would love to get some of these pre-sold. If you guys have buyers ready to go, you know, they can be working with the lender their choice. I saw Joe Long was on here too. So, I mean, this could be an opportunity for some of these buyers who are looking to get in that lower price point and have new construction. So I could put my email in the chat box if you're interested.
Thank you.
Thank you.